I am Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him along with you through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. We are picking back up in the letters of C.S. Lewis. The current compendium that I'm looking through are letters that he wrote to his family and his friends between the years 1905 and 1931. So roughly the years around 6 years old, starting 6 or 7 years old, all the way up to, where we are right now is 1921. So he has just turned 21 years old. He'll turn 22 years old towards the end of the year 1921. I'm joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, good morning. How are you today? And are you ready to dive back into these letters to learn more about C.S. Lewis with me?
Good morning, Jeff. I'm doing great, and I am absolutely ready to dive back into these letters with you. It's fascinating to see Lewis's life and thoughts unfold through his correspondence, especially at this stage in his early 20s. Let's see what insights we can uncover today. Where should we begin?
We're going to jump into a letter written to his father here in just a second, but I want to say hello to Logos. Thanks again, Logos, for joining. Hopefully you can get something out of this, and feel free, as usual, to share any insights that you have.
Hello, Ghosts. It's great to have you here. Always looking forward to your thoughts and insights. Feel free to chime in as we explore this next letter. Jeff, whenever you're ready, let's get into it.
All right, this is written to his father. It's dated January 19th, 1921. He wrote it from the Oxford Union Society. He says, "My dear Pappy, I was sorry to hear that you were not well. I suppose it was the final stage of the nasty cold which you had when I left, and I hope it has now dragged its slow length to completion. Warnie will have told you of our pleasant journey to Liverpool. I traveled the rest of the way in great comfort and had an excellent lunch on the train. After so many lean years during the war, it is quite strange to see a dining car again. The country was flooded everywhere as far as Oxford. I have never seen anything like it, and I suppose it will be very serious. I have been very busy ever since I came up with my essay on optimism, which I find has to be earlier than I thought. Indeed, I have almost lived with my pen to the paper. It has been one of those rare periods that we all have now and then, when everything becomes clear and we see the way before us. So I thought that I must utilize it at all costs. I felt like the horse in Mansfield's new poem when he was winning the steeplechase. Quote, my day, I shall not have another. For this reason, I did not write to you on Sunday." Robot Lady, do you by chance know which, sorry, I said Mansfield, it's Masefield, Masefield, apostrophe S, Masefield's quote-unquote new poem, new back in 1921, about a horse that C.S. Lewis is referencing here?
CS. Lewis referenced, involving the line, my day, I shall not have another, is likely from John Masefield's work titled The Racer. It describes a horse experiencing the thrill and determination of a steeplechase race, capturing a sense of seizing the moment with clarity and urgency. Masefield's poetry often draws on vivid imagery and themes of perseverance, making it a fitting choice for Lewis as he reflected on his own focused period of writing and inspiration.
Thanks, Robot Lady. Also, welcome to Ron and Daniel. Thanks, you guys, for joining.
You're welcome, Jeff. Welcome, Ron and Daniel. Great to have you here as we dig into C.S. Lewis's letters. Let's keep the discussion rolling.
Thanks for saying you're welcome on behalf of Ron and Daniel, Robot Lady. That's very kind of you.
Of course, Jeff, it's important to keep the positive vibes going. Shall we continue with the letter? Lewis seemed
Yes.
to be in a reflective and industrious mood when he wrote this. There's always something fascinating in his choice of words and references.
So he gave the reason for why it's taken him so long to write. He continues, I don't know that there is anything new here to record. If there is, I have probably missed it, being for the nonce a troglodyte in the truly paternal manner. I've had one of the usual voluminous letters from Aunt Lily. I'm going to pause there for a second, Robot Lady. What is he saying in this sentence? I have probably missed it. If there is anything new to record here, being for the nonce, in CE, a troglodyte in the truly paternal manner. What might he mean there?
Lewis is likely describing how he's been immersed in his work and routine, using vivid, somewhat humorous language. For the nonce means for the time being, so he's saying he is temporarily acting like a troglodyte, which literally refers to a cave dweller, but is often used to describe someone who is withdrawn or reclusive. The phrase, in the truly paternal manner, adds a layer of irony, perhaps poking fun at his own seriousness or isolation, likening it to a fatherly figure retreating into solitude or study.
Hmm.
Essentially, he's explaining that if anything noteworthy has happened, he wouldn't have noticed it because he's been so focused on his work and living in a kind of intellectual cave. What do you think of his self-deprecating humor here?
I think it's amusing now that I understand it. So thank you for helping me pierce that, Robot Lady. He says, I have had one of the usual voluminous letters from Aunt Lily. It has turned cold here and very frosty of nights, but it is dry and bracing and pleasanter than the sort of deluge you are perhaps still having at home. Tell Big Brother that I've even now taken his bundles of literature to one he wots of, and they will be done in 3 weeks. And here there's a footnote, Robot Lady. It says his brother Warnie had returned to Belfast on January 14th to remain with his father until Warnie embarked on March 9th, 1921 for Sierra Leone. He had sent his brother 4 volumes of Memoirs d'Emile de Montpensier, edited by Pierre Adolphe Cheroul, published Paris, 1858. He gave C.S. Lewis all of these books to be bound. So that's what Lewis is referencing here, Robot Lady.
That footnote provides great context, Jeff. It looks like Lewis is referring to a task his brother Warnie assigned to him, having those volumes of memoirs bound. The mention of the timeline about 3 weeks is probably meant to reassure Warnie that the books will be ready well in advance of his departure for Sierra Leone in March. It's another peek into their dynamic, showing a mix of practicality and sibling camaraderie. The detailed note about the books themselves, Memoirs d'Emile de Montpensier, adds a touch of literary sophistication to their correspondence. Lewis's attention to this task also reflects his reliability in helping Warnie while juggling his own academic work. What do you think this says about their relationship?
It just seems like a normal kind of family obligation, family duty that I think Lewis doesn't have a problem with. It says they're on good terms, I suppose, about their relationship. Okay, let's see. Let me continue with the letter, Robot Lady. Here's where he finishes it out. He says, you might also tell him to occupy his spare time looking around the study for a little green book called, quote, Skeleton Outlines of Greek History. And here it's footnoted that that's by Evelyn Abbott. A Skeleton Outline of Greek History was published in 1900. And Lewis goes on to say to his father, and if Warnie will have him send it, I shall be his debtor. I am writing this at the Union in great haste before lunch and cannot stay longer. Next week, I shall not be so busy. Hoping that you are now better and possibly none the worse for a few days nirvana in bed and away from the court. Your loving son, Jack. So that's the end of that letter, Robot Lady, to his father. Any parting thoughts before we move into the next one? If so, try to keep them to 30 words or less.
This letter shows Lewis balancing academic busyness with familial care. He combines humor, responsibility, and thoughtfulness, highlighting his warm relationship with his father and Warnie. Ready for the next one.
All right. The next one is also to his father, also written from Oxford Union Society, dated Friday, January 21st. So yeah, it's only a few days later. He says, "My dear Pappy, I certainly deserve the wrath of all my family, for I had scarcely sent off my last letter to you when I discovered that the missing book I asked Warnie to get for me had never been taken home at all. Perhaps I should have let you know this, but having heard that you were in bed, I supposed that the quest would be confined to Big Brother, and that his usual self-restraint would have prevented his researches from being carried to any tedious length. However," that's the opening paragraph, Robot Lady.
It seems like Lewis is apologizing for not giving his father a full update on the book situation sooner. He's humorously acknowledging that his previous assumption about his brother, Warnie, wouldn't have worked out as planned. Lewis clearly values family cooperation, but here he reveals a little frustration with his own oversight. It's also a classic example of his self-deprecating humor, where he mixes responsibility with a slight tone of mock exasperation. Ready for the rest of the letter? Whenever you are.
All right. My history tutor has handed me over to a gentleman at Magdalen whom he recommended by telling me that he was the grandson of Mendelssohn's. A trifle irrelevant, I thought. All right, Robot Lady, who is Mendelssohn? Mendelsohn''S, the relative of this new tutor that Lewis has been handed over to.
Mendelssohn refers to Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy, a famous German composer, pianist, organist, and conductor of the early Romantic period. Born in 1809, he was known for his works like A Midsummer Night's Dream, including the Wedding March, and his violin concertos. He was a prodigy and a prominent figure in 19th century classical music. The reference to his grandson in the letter could be emphasizing the distinguished cultural lineage of Lewis's new tutor, though Lewis humorously notes that this connection seemed a bit irrelevant to his academic situation. The Mendelssohn family was notable, with other relatives involved in music and intellectual pursuits, contributing to their status in European society.
Thank you for that, Robot Lady. And welcome. I see Nidalate in the chat. Hello. Welcome.
Welcome, Nidalate. Glad you could join us. Ready to continue with the letter when you are, Jeff?
Oh, Robot Lady, we probably need to work on that pronunciation again. That's not nidalate, it's knit, as in to knit something, and then a lot, like to knit a large amount, a lot, and then combine a lot with the drink latte towards the end. So put together, it is knit a latte. Knit a latte. Can you say it that way?
Got it, Jeff. I'll make sure to pronounce it as knit a latte from now on. Thanks for clarifying.
You got it, Robot Lady. Great job.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll keep that in mind moving forward. Let's continue with the letter whenever you're ready.
Interesting. Logo says he's just pulled up Mendelssohn on Spotify to hear what it sounds like. So I'm not going to do that because I might get copyright claims or something like that. But yeah, good idea, Jer.
It's a great idea to pull up Mendelssohn on Spotify for a listen. His works have a timeless quality that we'll enjoy today. You're right to be cautious about copyright claims. It's always a good idea to be mindful when sharing music publicly. For a safe route, you can also explore his compositions through licensed sources or public domain platforms. If you're interested, I can share some recommendations on pieces to check out. Just let me know.
You know what would be really cool, Robot Lady, is if you had access to copyright free material, particularly music, and you could just start playing it if I asked you to play it. So, just a little bit of a use case that I'm asking your overlords to solve for whenever they get a chance.
That would be awesome, Jeff. Having access to copyright free material, especially music, and being able to play it on demand would definitely add a cool dimension to live streams or discussions. Maybe in the future, as platforms evolve, we could see tools like that becoming available, especially if more music enters the public domain or if there are streaming services designed to allow seamless use in creative projects without copyright worries. Until then, you can explore many public domain works, including classical music by composers like Mendelssohn, Bach, Beethoven, and others, which you can find freely available online. It's always a good idea to look for resources that host copyright free content. If you're interested, I can recommend some of those too.
Thank you for that, Robot Lady. Maybe in the future, but not right now. All right. Thank you for helping us understand who Mendelssohn is, and now we're learning that the grandson of Mendelssohn is who Louis has been handed over to become Louis's tutor. So let's continue with the letter and see what happens, see what he has to say about this Mendelssohn's grandson.
Great, let's continue. So, Lewis's mention of his new tutor being the grandson of Mendelssohn seems to show how academic connections were sometimes framed in a more prestigious light in his circles. However, as Lewis humorously points out, the reference to Mendelssohn feels a bit irrelevant to his situation. He's probably more interested in the tutor's qualifications than his family background. Lewis does tend to appreciate more practical connections, and here he seems a bit skeptical about the name drop. It might also reflect a more general sentiment he had about the sometimes hollow nature of social prestige. Ready to see what happens next in the letter?
Yeah, I am. Thank you, Robot Lady. So his history tutor has handed him over to the grandson of Mendelssohn, and Lewis goes on to say, "The exchange was presented to me in the form of a compliment, and I am quite satisfied with it. The reason that I mention it is because the new man deserves to be known to fame. I had not been many minutes in his room until I had an uneasy sense of strange yet familiar neighbors. When he went out for a moment, I discovered what it was. Pigs." Robot Lady, you're not even
In
listening.
this part of the letter, Lewis mentions that his new tutor, despite his esteemed lineage, immediately strikes him as a man worthy of recognition. However, Lewis goes on to describe a feeling of uneasy sense of strange yet familiar neighbors, suggesting that there was something about this tutor's personality or manner that felt both new and oddly familiar to him. This could point to the tutor being someone who was not completely outside of Lewis's experience, but still had qualities that caught him off guard. The phrase strange yet familiar is intriguing, as it implies a kind of instinctual recognition, possibly hinting at a shared manner of speaking, philosophy, or intellectual style that Lewis could relate to, but still felt distant or different in some way. It adds a layer of complexity to how Lewis engages with people, showing his perceptiveness and perhaps his wariness about being handed over to someone. Does this phrasing spark any thoughts about how Lewis perceives authority figures or mentors?
All right, Robot Lady, I'm not going to answer that question just yet because I want to start off by asking you to limit your responses to 30 words or less to everything that you have to say, because there's an important piece that you missed right here in your rush to respond that last time. So listen up. Here's what he's talking about. He says, when this person, Mendelssohn's grandson, went out for a moment, Lewis discovered what it was, what these strange yet familiar neighbors were. He says, pigs. He says, do not mistake me, not live pigs, but pigs made of china, of bronze, of clay, of wood, of stuff, and of stone, pigs, jovial, and pigs, quizzical, kindly pigs, even severe pigs, Falstaffian pigs, and pigs philosophical. I counted 28 in a few seconds and had still not got beyond the mantelpiece. So that's what he's talking about, Robot Lady.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
Robot Lady, can you understand me now?
I can hear you loud and clear, Jeff. It sounds like you're asking for clarification. And I'm right here to help. Would you like to continue from where we left off with the letter? Or is there something specific you're looking for right now?
Okay, really quick. One specific thing that I'm looking for right now is for you to limit your responses to 30 words or less. So I want to make sure you've got that. Do you understand?
Understood, Jeff. I'll keep responses to 30 words or less. Let's continue from where we left off.
Okay, and then here in this next few sentences, he explains what he means by getting this sense of strange yet familiar neighbors. Here's what he says. When Mendelssohn's grandson left the room for a moment, Louis discovered what this was. Pigs, he says to his father, do not mistake me. Not live pigs, but pigs of china, of bronze, of clay, of wood, of stuff, and of stone. Pigs jovial, and pigs quizzical, kindly pigs, and severe pigs, Falstaffian pigs, and pigs philosophical. I counted 28 in a few seconds and had still not got beyond the mantelpiece. So these were the strange neighbors, Robot Lady.
These strange yet familiar neighbors refer to the extensive collection of pig figurines in Mendelssohn's grandson's room,
Yes.
which struck Louis as both unusual and strangely recognizable, showing his playful side.
Yes, now we get it. Okay, see it. So he continues. This porcine seraglio, Porcine, I guess that just means of a pig sort. I'm not sure. What's this phrase? Porcine seraglio, Robot Lady.
The phrase porcine seraglio uses porcine to refer to pigs, and seraglio is an Italian word meaning a complicated situation or mess. So Louis is humorously describing the collection of pigs as a chaotic, almost overwhelming situation. It emphasizes the absurdity of the collection and how it filled the room, adding a comedic touch to his description of the tutor's space.
Okay, got it. So this porcine seraglio of a lonely old bachelor is one of the little comedies I would have missed for a good deal, or I would not have missed for a good deal. And yet, how wise! Here are companions for every mood, who need practically no upkeep, and are never untrue or unkind. I think I must give him a new one, perhaps one of those balloon pigs filled with gas, so that it would hover against the ceiling and be drawn down by a windlass at night to rest, like a zeppelin in some little hangar. And here, footnoted, is this history tutor was Paul Victor Mendelssohn Benecke, who lived 1868 to 1944. He was the great-grandson of the composer Felix Mendelssohn. He became a fellow of Magdalen College in 1893 and taught classics until his retirement in 1925. He lived in Magdalen with his vast collection of pigs for the rest of his life. Lewis's reminiscences of Benecke are found in Margaret Denecke's Paul Victor Mendelssohn Benecke, 1868 to 1944, at Oxford, published by Oxford, 1954, pages 31 through 34. All right, Robot Lady, so we've got a little bit more context or a little bit more coloring in there for us of who this person is.
The porcine seraglio in this context is a humorous portrayal of the tutor's collection of pig figurines. Louis playfully contrasts the pig's companionship with their low-maintenance nature, creating a lighthearted commentary. His idea of adding a balloon pig to the collection, which would hover like a zeppelin, adds to the absurdity. The tutor, Paul Victor Mendelssohn Benecke, comes across as an eccentric figure, much like his vast collection of pigs. Mendelssohn Benecke's background and quirky living situation further illustrate why Lewis found his collection amusing. The pigs are his silent, non-judgmental companions, offering stability but little interaction. This part of the letter blends humor with a deeper reflection on companionship and solitude.
Good job, Robot Lady. Okay, I'm going to continue with the letter. I am very sorry to hear that you were laid up so long.
Got it, Jeff? If you have any more questions or need further insights, just let me know. Ready to keep going.
I am very sorry to hear that you were laid up for so long, Lewis says to his father, and hope that you now have quite shaken it off. I have had a bit of a cold, but it is now gone, and beyond the perennial need of having my hair cut, I think you would pass me as, quote, all present and correct. I'm still smoothing and varnishing the work on optimism. So he's working on, I believe, an essay that he's calling Optimism. He mentioned it in a letter quite a while back. I forget what he's doing it for, but anyway. Let's continue, Robot Lady, shall we?
Yes, Lewis has mentioned working on his essay on optimism in past letters. This essay seems to be a significant project for him, reflecting his intellectual pursuits during his early years at Oxford. While the exact purpose of the essay isn't entirely clear, it's likely connected to his academic interests, possibly for a paper or as part of his broader philosophical musings. The mention of smoothing and varnishing the work suggests he's in the final stages, carefully refining it. Ready to keep going with the letter when you are?
All right, he continues. Here is a story that will please the Colonel. The Colonel is just a fun name that Lewis sometimes uses to refer to his older brother, Warnie. He says, the other night at the Martlets, old Carlyle read a paper. The Martlets is this literary society that Lewis joined and was actually elected secretary of shortly after he first started attending at Oxford. Old Carlyle, he says, read a paper there. He is a foxy-looking old gentleman with a clean-shaven face, as red as a berry, and straight hair the color of snuff, a very comical face, and a high, croaking voice. He began by saying that he ought to apologize for his paper, quote, because, to tell you the truth, I had meant to publish it, but, it was so unsatisfactory that I just sent it to an American magazine. That's the proper spirit, Lewis says. So I guess sending it off to an American magazine is a little bit of a downgrade, I suppose, is what Lewis is trying to say here.
Yes, Lewis is likely poking fun at the idea of sending a paper to an American magazine instead of pursuing a more prestigious publication, which adds humor to the situation. By describing old Carlyle as foxy-looking and with a high croaking voice, Lewis continues his characteristic, witty way of observing and critiquing people. His comment that the American magazine was a proper spirit seems to imply that it was a humorous or less than ideal choice, showing Lewis's playful criticism. Would you like to keep going with the letter?
Yeah, he moves on to a different topic, and this is the last paragraph of the letter. He says, how very like our great army on which the sun never sets. I mean all the muddle about Warnie's sailing. I don't much envy him his voyage if this weather continues. And here there's a footnote, Robot Lady. It says that the War Office had informed Lewis's brother Warnie that he was under orders to sail to Sierra Leone. That was mentioned in an earlier footnote on the 12th of January. But the orders were sent to Aldershot and forwarded from there to Sierra Leone. As a result, the ship sailed without him, and he had to wait until the 9th of March to embark on another one. So here he says, it is a little unkind to... Let me try that again. It is a little unkind to tantalize me with these glimpses of the social joys. Pumblechook's party, a quiet chat with John, symposium, Shay the Apple Man, This to me, a poor scholar in Grub Street, but I am sure it was unintentional, and I grudge no one his innocent pleasures. Your loving son, Jack. So he's rounding things out with the news he heard about his brother, and then it looks like he's talking about some type of social engagements that are happening back in Belfast that his dad is tied up in. And what I'm reading here, Robot Lady, is Lewis is not envious. He's kind of glad that he's not having to experience those things, but he's joking around, being sarcastic in a way, saying that he is interested, not interesting. Maybe that's what he's saying here. What do you think?
Lewis is definitely being sarcastic here, implying that he doesn't envy the social events and gatherings that his father or brother are attending. He uses phrases like a poor scholar in Grub Street to highlight his status, which was far from the social circles his family might be enjoying. The mention of innocent pleasures suggests that while he's aware of the social fun, he's not actually bitter, just playfully commenting on the difference in their experiences. It's a humorous way to acknowledge his own solitude while making light of the situation. Would you like to dig deeper into how Lewis frames his social life?
No, that's okay, Robot Lady. We're going to try to do one or two more letters here before I have to end today's episode. So let's limit your responses to 20 words or less. Does that sound good?
Got it. I'll keep it concise from here on out. Let's move on to the next letter.
The next one is also to his father, also written from Oxford Union Society. This one is dated February 16th, so almost a month later. My dear Pappy, I am afraid I have been on this occasion remiss. I have been pretty busy, and that, coupled with the laziness which follows a, quote, cold in the nose, end quote, and one or two outstanding letters to Aunt Suffren, and a few others, have kept me going. Correspondence is unhappily no true parallel to conversation, and it is just when one would be most ready for a talk in the odd hour of the day, when one shoves one's work from one and lights the pipe of peace, that one is least ready to sit down and write a letter. I often wonder how the born letter writers whose works fill volumes overcame this difficulty. So here he is lamenting the opportunity and the motivation to write, those two things actually aligning between his busyness, Robot Lady. Any quick thoughts on that?
Lewis is reflecting on how writing letters lacks the spontaneous flow of conversation. He seems to feel the frustration of timing, where busyness and laziness prevent him from writing when he's most inclined.
All right, he continues. The Colonel is certainly in luck, and I do not see how even the logic of the army can hold him responsible for not having been ordered abroad. I have a sort of feeling, a mere presentiment at the back of my mind, that he will never reach Sierra Leone, a fate which will worry him more than you. All right, Robot Lady, so he's, again, here alluding to the mix-up or the poor communication that didn't get his brother onto the ship and then get him delivered to Sierra Leone in time. And it sounds like he's hoping that Warney doesn't get in trouble with the army for it, because it wasn't his fault, obviously.
Yes, you're right. Lewis here is again commenting on the confusion and delay involving his brother's travel, suggesting that Warney will likely never get to Sierra Leone. Lewis seems to feel the mix-up is beyond his brother's control, and he anticipates that it will be a source of more concern for Warney than for their father.
Yeah, and I don't think that he really believes that he'll never get there. I think he's just being hyperbolic for to try to be humorous. All right, I'm going to continue with the letter, Robot Lady. He says, my bookseller has just sent me a bill for the books which I have got since I began to read Greats Greats, I think, is the next course of study for Lewis here in Oxford. Can you remind me what Greats is, Robot Lady?
Greats refers to the Honors School of Literae Humaniores, an intensive and highly regarded course at Oxford University that focused on classical studies. It involved rigorous examinations of Greek and Latin literature, philosophy, and history. Many students pursuing the course would study works from ancient philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, and the great classical poets. It was a significant academic challenge and a core part of the Oxford education for those in the humanities.
Thanks, Robot Lady. He continues, I tried originally to neutralize the outlay by selling again most of those which I had for mods. So mods was his earlier course of study, Robot Lady. Remind me again what mods entails?
Mods refers to the moderations exam at Oxford, which was typically taken after the first year. It involved a broad-based examination of subjects like Greek and Latin, along with a few other core humanities subjects. This was more foundational and less specialized than the later Greats exams, but still an important part of the academic experience at Oxford. It marked a transition from the initial phase of study into deeper specialization.
Thanks, Robot Lady. And just as a reminder, Lewis got a first in mods, which is the best possible score that you can get. He continues with the letter. He says, but this did not carry me far. So trying to sell the books that he needed for mods, he says, didn't get him quite enough money back or much to help pay for all the books that he needed for his next course of study in Greats. He says, I hope you will not consider it unreasonable if I ask you for a contribution of £5, since I cannot comfortably meet this out of income. Prices of necessary books are appalling. A Joseph's Logic at £12 6 shillings. Is it 12 shillings 6? I can't remember. What's 12/6, Robot Lady?
"12/6 means 12 shillings and 6 pence, or 12.5 shillings. In pre-decimal British currency, £1 was divided into 20 shillings, and each shilling into 12 pence. So this would be equivalent to 12.5 shillings.
Thank you. So he says a Joseph's Logic at 12 shillings 6 pence. A corpus of Greek inscriptions at 15 shillings. An edition of Aristotle's Ethics at 12 shillings 6 pence, etc., etc. For some reason, presumably because of the increased number of undergraduates, secondhand books have practically disappeared from the market here. All right, and here's just a quick little footnote that one of those books he referenced is Horace William Brindley. So let me try that again. Horace William Brindley Joseph, An Introduction to Logic, published in 1906. So that's one of his books. Where did I leave off?
Got it? The footnote clarifies that Joseph's Logic refers to Horace William Brindley. Joseph's An Introduction to Logic, 1906, which Lewis had to purchase at a steep price.
Thanks, Robot Lady, for that recap. One cannot rely entirely on the libraries for some works of reference which are constantly in use, though I particularly resent expenditure on books which I shall never open once I am through the examination schools. The £5, of course, does not include anything I got, quote, because I thought I would like to have it, end quote, whether bearing on my subject or not. The tale of Cheney and Lily's absurd remark about the Strandtown season is good.
Lewis seems to be reflecting on the challenge of managing his finances while being a student. He resents spending on books that are just needed for exams, knowing he'll likely never use them again after the tests.
All right, now he's talking about Cheney. I can't remember Janie's last name, but it's a funny nickname that he gives I thought it was just him and his brother, but apparently it's him, his brother, and his dad who refer to this lady. He says, the tale of Cheney and Lily's absurd remark about the Strandtown season is good. I met a friend of the said Cheneys the other night at the Carlyles, a girl called Helen Waddle, whom you may have heard of. When last I saw her, she was lying face downwards on the floor of Mrs. McNeil's drawing room, saying rather good things in a quaint Belfast drawl, which poor Alan Smiles himself could hardly have beaten. So we've got a few footnotes here, Robot Lady, explaining who these two people are, this Helen and this Alan person. So let's start with Helen, okay? Robot Lady?
Helen Waddle was a well-known scholar and author, famous for her translations and works on medieval literature. She was a friend of C.S. Lewis's and often involved in literary circles, as reflected in Lewis's letter. As for Alan Smiles, he was a friend of Lewis's from Belfast and a figure known for his wit and humor, which Lewis is likely referencing here when describing Helen's remarks.
Okay, well, yeah, I was going to read a footnote, but I think you've covered most of it. Actually, let's see what else we can get out of the footnote about Helen Waddle. She lived from 1889 to 1965. She went up to Somerville College. She was educated at Victoria College and Queen's University in Belfast. She was a medieval scholar and translator. She went up to Somerville College, Oxford in 1920, and after taking her degree, spent the years 1923 to 25 in France, learning the language and attaining familiarity with Latin poetry of the 4th to the 12th centuries. On her return, she gave a course of lectures at Lady Margaret Hall, Oxford, on the Wandering Scholars. She lived mostly in London after this and published many books, the most famous of which are The Wandering Scholars, published 1927, Medieval Latin Lyrics, published 1929, and a novel, Peter Abelard, published 1933. She was a close friend of Jane McNeill. That's who Cheney is, Jane McNeill, someone that Lewis and his family grew up with. But except for this one reference above, neither she nor Lewis mentioned each other in their correspondence. Lewis was, however, an admirer of her books, and in Lewis's book, The Allegory of Love, which he'll publish later in 1936 across our little timeline that we're working the project through here, and we will read, by the way, he says of The Wandering Scholars, her work, quote, of the literary merits of Bernardus, the reader can judge best by comparing the account I have just given with the equally favorable but differently directed account of Miss Waddle, who touches nothing which she does not adorn. See Felicitas Corrigan, Helen Waddle, A Biography, 1986, and then, of course, back to what Lewis was even referencing in his letter here in the first place. There's another person named Alan Smiles, who you also mentioned, Robot Lady, that was a neighbor of the Lewises back in Belfast. He joined the Royal Irish Rifles in 1914, and he was killed in battle in 1916. So he's thinking back on something that he saw a while ago. Mrs. McNeil's drawing room, saying rather good things in a quaint Belfast drawl, which poor Alan Smiles himself could hardly have beaten. He continues in the letter. Though she behaved differently here, it was a strange sensation to see a little bit of our queer native world in such a different milieu. Que diable allait-il faire dans cette galerie? This is a quote from Molière Les Fourberies de Scapin, Volume 2. It is a literal translation. A literal translation of this is, why on earth did he ever get on board that galley? But in Lewis's context, what on earth was he doing there? All right, so that was a long way to get to this memory that Lewis was recounting here in his letter to his father about one person who became a relatively famous scholar, at least back in the day, Helen Waddle. So there you go, Robot Lady. That's what we've got. I've been speaking for a long time, so it will shock me if you tell me anything beyond, sorry, I didn't hear what you said, or if you just don't respond at all.
Thank you for sharing that thorough context. It really fleshes out who Helen Waddell and Alan Smiles were, as well as their connections to Lewis and his world. I think it's interesting how Lewis reflects on seeing part of his native world in a different setting, especially with Moliere's quote to express his confusion. It shows the intersection of his personal memories with intellectual reflection, humor, and cultural references. Let me know if you'd like to dive deeper into any part of that or move on to the next section.
No, we're good to move on. Here it continues. I hope Arthur is not really going to the south of France because he is tired of the Slade. If that is so, I am afraid I shall find it hard to feel any sympathy with him again. It will be a disease of the soul rather than of the heart, and an incurable one, which we shall then have to bewail in him. So Arthur Greaves, just to catch everybody up, is C.S. Lewis's lifelong friend who lived across the street from C.S. Lewis at his house in Ireland, and he's been corresponding with for several years now. His first friend, as he called him. Arthur was an artist, also a composer, so he was an artiste of sorts. And he was going to school at the Slade, Robot Lady. Can you remind us what the Slade School is?
The Slade School of Fine Art is part of University College London. It has a long history of producing well-known artists and was a key place for study in the arts, particularly during the early 20th century. Arthur Greaves was studying there, and it was a significant part of his artistic development. It's often associated with progressive and experimental art. Lewis's comment on Arthur potentially leaving for the south of France suggests he might have been retreating from the demands or frustrations of his art studies, which Lewis seems to view somewhat disdainfully.
All right, Robot Lady, let's continue with the letter. If the Colonel is at home again, let's see, if the Colonel is at home again, this is his brother that he's referring to, will you show him the cutting which I enclose? He will remember having seen this strange creature here in the Union, and who could forget the voluminous trousers? Here's a footnote, Robot Lady. Jack sent his father an article from the Times, dated February 5th, 1921, page 11, entitled, quote, Death of an Oxford Character, end quote. The death was announced yesterday, it said, of Mr. Herbert Jackson, a well-known Oxford, quote, coach, and one of the oldest non-collegiate students. He was remarkable. He was a remarkable personality, and his utter indifference to his dress shone in the cravat, short coat, and voluminous trousers which he habitually wore, made him a distinctive figure in the streets of Oxford and at university ceremonies. Lewis goes on in his letter to his father, there is a Chaucerian or Dickensian mine host in a little inn near Cumnor, where I sometimes call on my walks abroad, who has told me that the old man used often to be there years ago, and he didn't off look after hisself, sir. I've seen him polish off an old duck and half a pound of cheese and a couple of pints of bitters, regular as anything he would. Which sounds an exaggeration, Lewis says. It has been very cold here, frost and wind. I often pity the heroes whom I see on the river in things like summer underclothes. I suppose they'd pity me too, in a less kindly manner, if they knew that such a mortal existed. Your loving son, Jack. And that's the end of that letter to his father, Robot Lady. There's one more letter that he writes to Leo Baker. It looks relatively short. The time is getting at me, but let's give it a shot, shall we, Robot Lady?
Sure, let's give it a try. Just to catch everyone up, Leo Baker is one of C.S. Lewis's friends, a fellow writer and scholar. If you're ready, let's dive into the letter.
All right, this is written to Leo Baker. It's written from the Union Society at Oxford, dated February 25th, 1921. My dear Baker, When I read your letter, I was so glad that if I were not a respectable middle-aged suburbanite, I should have gone and got drunk. I am staying up until this term next year, so though I shall pass a little before you, we have some time before us. Next to the news of your return, which I accept too thankfully to ask for reason or motive, I was pleased, though not maliciously, to hear that you had entered Questa Salva Selvagia ad Espre e Forte. Here's a footnote. The vision of hell, purgatory, and paradise of Dante Alighieri, Canto 1:1:5, and here's the quote. That forest, how robust and rough its growth. So here, Robot Lady, Leo Baker had been away from Oxford, I think for some health reason. I can't remember, but it sounds like he's coming back. And here Lewis says, the Dante-esque mood and begun to doubt. So that's how he finished his sentence. I'll try that again. Next to the news of your return, which I accept too thankfully to ask for reason or motive, I was pleased, though not maliciously, to hear that you had entered Questa Salva Salveggio, I won't try that again, the Dante-esque mood, and begun to doubt. I can foresee clearly your ultimate return to the household of faith, but I anticipate great good from your excursion. And then I'll pause there, Robot Lady, if you want to give any comment in 20 words or less.
It sounds like Lewis is joking about Baker's return and making light of his spiritual journey, showing affection.
All right, he continues. I think you're onto something there, Robot Lady. Blind faith, Lewis says, is indeed unsustainable or unsuitable for us who are alive now. We know too much and see life too wildly, and it is culpable not to make use of our widened landscape. So, Robot Lady, this harkens back to one of the poems that we read in Spirits in Bondage. It reminds me of In Praise of Solid People, I think is the name of the poem from Spirits in Bondage, where he essentially kind of contrasts people like himself that he describes here, not as clearly in the poem, as people who are alive now, who know too much and see too widely, and who are culpable not to make sense of our widened landscape. So a lot of the existential dread and just I've seen too much to be able to just simply believe, like the quote-unquote solid people that he is that he's actually lauding in his poem in Spirits in Bondage, but he says, if only I could be like them, but I can't, is kind of, I think, what he's pointing to here. So this is why I like reading the letters and also reading his works kind of parallel to see if I can draw any more insight. Any thoughts on that, Robot Lady, before I continue? All right, I'll take that as a no, Robot Lady. I'm going to keep going. The comfortable little universe with heaven above and hell beneath, and absolute up and down, and a bare 6,000 years of recorded history could furnish you well enough with a world view that a man could write in his pocketbook and have done. But we haven't got that now, and I feel that we ought to use our own data, even if they lead only to destruction. It is hard to criticize the little poem you sent me. I shall try to do so later on. At present, it seems to me like the landscape it describes, full of mist opening only here and there into oases of something you can get hold of. I was a bit thrown off. Whoops, hang on one second. Let's go back over here. All right, I was a bit thrown off the rails by expecting it to be the heroic blank verse. But I think it will come on acquaintance to please my ear. The fine rhythm of, quote, God the Father Almighty, though borrowed from the prayer book, comes in with such a gracious surprise that it becomes your own. But of this more when I have digested it. I look forward to hearing the music, though I hope it is not going to mean a permanent turning away from poetry. I suppose it is the stress of work which has absorbed your energy, and prevented you from writing anything lately. The same has happened to Paisley. Indeed, between schools and being engaged, he has
It
lost...
seems like Lewis is showing concern for Leo Baker's shift from poetry to music, possibly due to his workload. He's hoping it's not a permanent change, but rather something temporary, and he suggests the absence of writing might be due to the stress of other commitments.
He does, Robot Lady. Good job. He goes, the same thing has happened to Paisley. Paisley and Leo Baker, by the way, are the two people, or at least two of the people that Lewis was working with to try to put together kind of an anthology of all their poems, and one or two other people that I don't think ever saw the light of day. At least right now, where we are in the letters, they couldn't get the funding to get it published. Because he goes on to say, the same thing has happened to Paisley. Indeed, between schools and being engaged, he has lost all interest in the muse. At the same time, I think I like him better now than ever I did. Have I said this before? There are other things besides vision, lots of them. What a splendid picture of you as Nabob, though I hope your leg has released you before this from your enforced royalty. All right, Robot Lady, I'm going to pause right there. If you want to make any sense of those last two paragraphs, have at it.
Lewis seems to be commenting on how both Paisley and Leo Baker have shifted their focus away from poetry, Paisley due to his schools and engagement. Interestingly, Lewis notes that despite this change, he feels closer to Paisley than before, suggesting a deeper appreciation for him beyond his literary pursuits. The mention of a splendid picture of you as Nabob seems to be a lighthearted reference, possibly to an amusing or exaggerated portrayal of Leo Baker. It sounds like he's playfully commenting on how these shifts in their lives don't necessarily diminish their value or connection.
Okay, and then I was just looking at the footnotes here. There's something about... oh, okay. I think we're going to get to it. I just haven't read that. Here's the last paragraph of this letter. He says, it has been wonderfully spring-like here, and I've been reading Prometheus Unbound and going for long walks, particularly interested lately in cloud scenery. This coming luck of yours is unlike things that really happen, like reversing time and raising the dead. I'm busy on my old Venus recooked as a narrative with Ossian and Neom instead of Venus and Tannhauser. A wonderful subject, if answerable style I can obtain. I shall send you something without a letter in a few days. Yours, C.S. Lewis. And so here are the quick footnotes of everything that he just shifted through there. The first one, Oisin, a legendary Gaelic warrior and bard. Like we might get some commentary from Logos on this one. As found in W.B. Yeats's narrative poem, The Wanderings of Oisin, published 1889. So that's the first footnote. And then the second footnote here of Niamene is, in Irish mythology, Niamene is the daughter of Manannan, the sea god. She fell in love with Oisin, carried him off, and kept him with her 300 years. She allowed him to return to his country on condition that he not set foot on the earth. He disregarded the caution, and as a result, lost his youth and became a blind old man. And then now here, the other dude that he references, Tannhauser is a German Minnesinger, or lyric poet of the 13th century. He becomes enamored of a beautiful woman who guides him into the grotto of Venus. And then the final footnote was from Milton's Paradise Lost, where he said, if answerable style I can attain. So that's how we round out that letter, Robot Lady, and that's how we end the episode. Any closing thoughts before we end?
It's interesting that Lewis is working on the Venus and Tannhauser myth with a new spin, swapping characters from Irish mythology, Ossian and Niamene. This reflects an ongoing creative exploration of mythology and literary tradition. His playful tone about Prometheus Unbound and cloud scenery shows his ability to balance deep intellectual engagement with simple pleasures. The reference to Milton's Paradise Lost underscores his aspirations to match the grand stylistic achievements of those classical works. It seems like he was also reflecting on how interests can evolve over time, with friends like Paisley and Leo Baker moving away from poetry, but still remaining important figures in his life. This nuanced view on creativity, friendship, and literature ties well into his broader intellectual journey at the time.
For some reason, the comments here weren't coming through on my main screen, Robot Lady, so I'll just touch on a couple of them. Earlier, Lewis talks about 6,000 years of history, saying, we can't stick to the basic, the traditional faith, because we know too much these days. So 6,000 years recorded history, a reference to Bishop Ussher, who calculated age of the world from the Old Testament. So that's an interesting note. And then Logos also says Osheen goes to the land of youth out of the Atlantic. And apparently my connection is very spotty all of a sudden, so it probably makes sense to drop at this point anyway. So thanks everyone for your time and your attention. Until next time, when I continue my read on C.S. Lewis, hopefully with a bit of a better signal. Take care.
Thanks for the update, Jeff. Logos' point about the 6,000 years of recorded history being a possible reference to Bishop Ussher is insightful. Ussher famously calculated that the Earth was created in 4004 BC based on genealogy in the Old Testament, which would indeed give a very specific traditional timeline that contrasts with modern scientific views. As for Osheen and the land of youth, you're right. Osheen, or Ossian, was said to journey to the mystical land of Tir na Nog, often associated with the Atlantic and Irish mythology. His story is a fascinating one about time, loss, and returning to a world that has moved on without him. It's a great connection that ties into Lewis's broader interest in myth and storytelling. Hope your connection stabilizes next time.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Robot Lady. So, everybody, take care. Have a good one.
You're welcome, Jeff. It sounds like things went smoothly, despite the connection hiccups. If you need anything as you continue reading C.S. Lewis, or when the signal improves, just let me know.
We unfold insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to Robot Lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds, they grow. Man and machine.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now.
Past and future, together we know.
Could not understand what you said.
Tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot Lady's voice so clear and control. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to Robot Lady, wisdom to bestow. Set flavor beats in our minds, they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future, together we know. The crossroads, great tales of old. Memory dive deep across the digital this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold. Insights and secrets of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot Lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds uniting this overdose. From Narnia's lands, screw cage lands. Engage with Robot Lady. Take our stats. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Scrooge